This is my channel's weekly compendium, ending Monday, November 6, 2023. Case file number 1327, written by Th Dan 7. The Island of Inexplicable Silence. It was a nice and sunny day by the sea at our summer cabin. My cousin and I took my grandpa's boat and went exploring a bunch of islands nearby. We live in a place with a bunch of archipelagos. After a while, we got to this island a little further out. We cruised along the shoreline when we noticed a small opening, just big enough for our boat to fit through. It was definitely man-made, so we decided to check it out. After about 15 meters or so, sorry Americans, I'm European, we arrive at the pond, and it's almost perfectly round. At the other side of the opening or canal, we see an old gazebo that's barely standing. We get to the middle of the pond, and then we notice it. Every sound we heard earlier has gone quiet. No seagulls, no wind, no nature noises. The only thing we can hear is the sound of us rowing. I can only describe the lack of sound as thick silence. It was weird. Of course, the sun vanishes behind some clouds, and suddenly the pond seems extremely dark, although it was very shallow. We were trying to joke about ghosts coming to get us, but both of us were clearly nervous. Out of nowhere, a plank in the gazebo falls from the roof and lands with a loud bang on the floor. We nearly jump out of our skins. We both decide it's time for us to go, turn the boat around and start rowing. We were almost at the opening again when we heard what sounded like groaning and thumping coming from the gazebo. Keep in mind, I was facing the gazebo while rowing. I saw something move behind it, but I couldn't make out what it was because I was panicking. When we got out, back to the regular world, everything was normal. Wind, birds, natural sounds. Even the sun came back. We have no idea what the hell happened back there, and it could very well have been some animal, but that whole place felt wrong. And the wind didn't stop because of a nearby predator. Someday, we will go back again and see what happens. Bonus file written by Corrupt173, The Two-Tone and the Unknown. Did an art show in Coventry, UK, at an old building which used to be where the ska band and the specials rehearsed in the damp, graffiti-stained basement. If you are from Coventry or was ever in the two-tone ska movement, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. It was late November or early December, and I was in a busking band playing Christmas songs while people came to look at the installations inside. That night, a paranormal experience team was holding a free session after the event, so myself and my girlfriend tagged along. We are not firm believers in ghosts, ghouls, and demons, but we like horror movies, and have never done one of these, so it sounded fun. We explored the whole building, feeling for cold spots and energy. This place is massive, with 3 or 4 floors, and upstairs is all art studios, so they are vast and untreated, especially sonically. It was all going well, and us and the team had decided that one of the rooms upstairs had a weird feeling about it, and of course, we hadn't been into the basement yet. At this point, we split the group in half, into 2 teams. One team would go into the studio upstairs that had a weird feeling, and the other down into the basement. We would then swap later. We were in the basement first. We were led down the stairs and armed only with torches, beginning to explore the cold, dark, wet rooms. The team told us it used to be a youth center, so they tried holding hands and talking to the space to see if they got any response. All quiet, nothing. It was windy that night, so we'd get the occasional leaves sweeping past the window, but generally it was a disappointing response. During one of these communication exercises, I was drawn to a long dark corridor that had small rooms on the right and led to a stairway on the left. I didn't separate from the group, but something kept me looking back into the dark void. After a few attempts and a few jokes made about the lack of activity, it was at this point that we decided to swap the teams around. As people made for the door at the far end of the room, I took one more look into this corridor where I saw or thought I saw or imagined a young chap wearing blue jeans, white trainers, and white t-shirt. He was blonde and had a noticeable silver chain around his neck that he wore over his shirt as a sort of statement. I can still remember his stance and everything. It was surreal and spooked me a bit. At the time, I convinced myself that my brain had just filled in a space. I was told I was a youth hunter, so my brain, desperate for a result after a few hours in the dark, just put a young man in the darkness. I thought about bringing it up at the end, we should talk about our findings, but I wasn't sure if I would. We went upstairs, which had a few noises answering our responses. They could have been the sound of radiators or old pipes, but it was fun and eerie at the same time. We all met up again at the main reception room downstairs to conclude the evening. The usual speeches of, "Join us again, discount, blah blah blah," was most of this, but just before leaving, they asked for any final thoughts. I said to myself that what I saw was probably nothing. It was late, let's all get home kind of attitude. That wasn't until a middle-aged lady, one of the other group, said that she was sure she saw a tall chap in white downstairs. I tuned into every word. He had white shoes and was just peeking around the corner in the basement by that long stairway. She continued to say that she wouldn't have noticed him if it wasn't for a silver necklace shining around his neck just as she was leaving. I didn't tell anyone that night what I saw, not even my girlfriend. There was no way the mediums or paranormal team could have constructed this for a result while we swapped locations. That was a creepy day for me. I haven't had a chance to go back there since, but do park along the road when visiting shops nearby, and I'm often reminded of the figure in the dark corridor and how a stranger described the exact same thing from a separate group. Case file number 1328, written by SaltGirl61, the day the sky shattered with the Columbia disaster. One beautiful winter morning back in 2003, I was sitting in a glider, reading a story to my toddler. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash from upstairs, and the house shook. My heart stopped, as I was alone with the baby. My husband had left earlier. I was too scared to go upstairs, so I quietly crept around and checked the doors, all still locked. There were no strange vehicles nearby. We lived in a rural area, and our house was set back from the road. I couldn't see anything such as a ladder that would aid someone in climbing up to the second floor. I finally told myself that vibrations from passing cars had made something big such as a TV or bookcase fall over. The house felt empty, so I relaxed somewhat. I still didn't want to go upstairs though. I turned on the news, which I never do on a Saturday, and watched as a newscaster at the Kennedy Space Center announced that the Space Shuttle Columbia was several minutes late in arrival. Then a minute later, there were reports of a loud explosion overhead in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Though I was a couple of hours east, I slowly realized what the loud noise was. A pilot friend of my husband called, asking for him. I told him, "Did you hear the space shuttle blew up just a while ago?" He said, "That can't be. I was at the airport just then taking pictures of it as I flew over and, oh my god, I took pictures of it breaking apart and didn't know what I was seeing. I thought the streamers might be ice or something falling off." He did indeed have a fabulous set of photographs, which he duly submitted to NASA. Creepy file number 129, written by Long Jumping Block 685, Red Lights in the Park. I was walking my dog one day in the park. The park is pretty big, with a lake and a part where the path leads through the woods. Me being a dumbass, I forgot it was getting dark early, but decided to continue walking. My dog is pretty big and protective, so I felt safe enough. She was walking loose ahead of me. Her collar has red lights in them. When we turned the corner through the woods, it was getting darker and darker, and even though I knew the park like it was my back pocket, I turned on the flashlight on my phone. Anyway, a few minutes go by, just silence, sounds of my footsteps, and the wind in the trees, when my dog suddenly started growling. I stopped. She's standing a few feet away, just a ring of red lights staring around the trees. I call her and she's by my side in a second. I don't know why, but I dismissed it as dumb doggy behavior, like smelling a rabbit or whatever, and kept walking. Very stupid, I know. So we keep walking, dog by my side, my flashlight in front of me. We turn another corner and my dog growls again. This time I freak out a little and look around me with the flashlight. Nothing. It was just a minute of walking before the path led us back into the park. I could make a run for it, but I had this weird feeling. So I took a few steps forward and saw someone standing a little way from the path, just standing there, like he just appeared out of nowhere. It was weird and I immediately felt nauseous. My dog starts full-on barking, growling, back hair standing up. She's a very social dog, even with complete strangers, so this had to be bad. Her barking kind of shocked me into moving. The moment I grabbed her to turn around to make a run for it, the figure stepped forward. I never ran so hard. I ran all the way back to the little bridge that connected the neighborhood to the park. My dog was still with me, thank God. The moment I got home, I called the local police and asked them to check it out. They didn't take it that seriously because nothing had happened, but they sent a car over. They found nobody, of course. I slept badly that night, and took me a while to walk there again, even in daylight. Bonus file written by Mostly Gray, The Shared Sense of Dread. My dad, my brother, and I were at a house with several outbuildings that my uncle had bought to fix up and sell. My uncle was showing us around. It was a very weird place. It had wainscoting over a door in the basement and a long tunnel running to the outside with metal teeth over the end. You could see sunlight through the tunnel. It was just big enough for a small man to crawl through. On the main floor at the back was a room with a lock on the outside. The room's walls were covered in black plastic, no windows. The floor was painted blue with milk paint. I felt an immediate sense of foreboding and refused to stay in the room. My brother and I went and looked at the Quonset house that was on one of the outbuildings. It must have been set up for a family member. Upon opening the door, we found the main room almost knee-deep in kids' toys. We walked towards the front where the kitchen was. There was no door, just a curtain. I immediately had an intrusive thought that told me there was a family in there at a Formica table with silver edges. The mother was cooking, and there was a man and 2 kids there. I completely felt that is what I would see. I could see the table and kitchen were yellow, all of this in my head. I pulled back the curtain, and of course, no one was there, but I had the kitchen correctly in my head. The entire layout was exactly what I thought it would be. My brother and I turned and left without speaking about it. About 10 years later, I brought it up to my brother about what I thought I would see after opening the curtain. He said to me, "That's exactly what I thought I'd see too." Something bad happened in that house. I don't know what it was, but something bad happened. Case file number 1329, written by Black Kirim, 14. Did I see my future self on the tram? I'm not sure if I'm imagining things or if I'm going crazy, but I believe I just saw my future. I mean, I always wondered if people have their future self walking around in the present, and I sometimes wondered if my future self is around too. But I think I should tell you the story now. I was just on my way home from work. I'm currently doing an apprenticeship as a metal worker. Due to some unlucky circumstances, I missed my tram and had to take the later one. When I took the next tram, I took a seat near the door, noticing a man on the opposite side of the door. I didn't pay him much attention at first, but then I noticed something. On his workwear, I could read the first initial of his first name and his full last name. That was when I realized that he had the same last name as me, while his first name also started with the same initial as my first name. After realizing that, I took a more exact look at him, and he did look quite similar to me. He had the same hair and eye color, and a similar if not the same hairstyle that I normally have. My hair is currently longer, but normally I have it rather short. And even his face did look kinda similar to mine. The only real difference was that he was a bit thinner than I currently am. Of course, he was a bit older, but still, the physical similarities were there. And since I already mentioned his workwear, he was wearing blue overalls looking similar to the one I was wearing, although I was wearing black overalls. But it was the same workwear which you would expect a metal worker to wear at work. It didn't stop there though. He was apparently working for a craftsman company that also seemed to have a focus on electrical engineering. This also caused me to believe that this man could be my future self, simply because I was planning on investing 2 more years at my local Academy of Technology in order to become a state-certified technician. And while I'm currently working on becoming a metalworker, I'm also open to becoming an electrical engineer, especially if my salary is higher then. The man apparently even lives in a part of my town where I always wanted to live due to close proximity to our local botanical garden. So yeah, I'm not sure if my mind is playing tricks on me, or if I'm going crazy, or if I actually saw my future self. But I definitely wanted to share my story. Case file number 1330, written by Merc123, The Mysterious Slapping Boards. Friends and I went hunting and camping away from home. We have made this trip annually and sometimes twice for the last 9+ years. In the last year, we finally moved spots about a few miles down the road from our original one. To set the stage, I'm a 2-times war vet, so I sleep fast and hard. I slept through rocket attacks, and my wife questions if I'm alive sometimes. We are sleeping in a soft-sided pop-up camper. At about 3 a.m., I'm woken up out of a dead sleep by a noise that sounds like two 2x4 boards being slapped together. Every 5 to 10 seconds, it does it. One time, except it's moving. It's loud and I can hear the echo off the trees. This goes on for minutes, and it moves from my right side to my left side and eventually further off in the distance, almost following the river we are camped near. No one else is awake or heard it. The next day, we talk about it and they think I'm crazy. That next night though, I got my laughs. Again, woken up out of a dead sleep by this thing. This time, everyone wakes up. The same exact sound. The tone, the pitch, loudness never changes until it moves away and then it slowly gets softer. But the sound is exactly the same every time. It only happened 2 of the 3 nights we were there. I Google and find stories from birds to Bigfoot. It became a running joke. Well, the next year we head back down to it again. This time we camped about a 1/4 mile up from the other campsite by the river. I ended up having to leave early, but asked when they got back if they heard it. They did, but only 1 night out of 4. Case file number 1331, written by Anonymous, The Scream That Stalked My Soul. I was 16 and living in a rural area between New York State and Pennsylvania, on the New York side. I knew a girl who lived out in the boonies on the Pennsylvania side, 3 or 4 miles away at that, and she wanted me to sneak into her room that night. Me, being the horny teenager that I was, ventured out on foot. She lived on a hill with a dirt road, and you had to walk up said dirt road through a heavily wooded area. On the way up, you can see significantly better than on the way down because of how the end of the woods faces the direction of the moon at night. Walking to her place went without a hitch. It was in the early morning that I began walking home, through the pitch dark woods. Thus, that's where the trouble began. The stretch of heavily wooded area went on for a mile or so. At the end of it is a clearing with a light attached to someone's shed nearby. I was walking on this barely visible road when I heard a rustling, which is normal when you're out in the woods at night. I wasn't alarmed at the rustling, but more so at the fact that I heard something getting closer to me, and it began screaming. Soon enough, this blood-curdling screeching was right next to my left ear. I was terrified and couldn't bring myself to stop or look to the side. I could only keep a steady pace and push on. I remember thinking that I just had to keep moving. Eventually, the screaming was directly behind me, and then shortly after, far away behind me. I never once looked back. As soon as I got the light that signaled the clearing, I ran all the way back home. I never really gave much thought to it in the following years, except for a story that I heard around the campfires. Some suggested it was a fox in heat, and I considered the explanation to make a fair amount of sense. However, one night I was browsing some local legends and ghost stories on the internet when I found a legend for the area that I walked through. Many people have reported hearing screaming when walking through that area, the story said, and many reported these things happening particularly in the woods. So I did what any sane person would do and called that my signal that I had enough of the internet for that night and went to bed just a little more nervous than usual. Case file number 1332, written by Not Nalsuna, The Silent Watchers. My girlfriend and I were visiting the Arches and the Canyonlands area for the weekend and ended up heading out pretty late from Moab to get into the Canyonlands, about a 45-minute to 1 hour drive. A few years previous, I'd gone there myself and stayed until the moon rose, because that meant people were leaving, and as a field recordist, that meant a quiet environment to record in. That night in 2020, the moon was bright and there were a few night photographers there that I ended up hanging out with, and it was generally a surreal experience and I felt completely safe. Hoping to have a similar time again with my girlfriend along for the ride, and forgetting the fact that maybe the clouds would largely block the moon that night, I drove us up. It was pretty dark before we even made it 15 minutes along the drive there. Having been there, more specifically Mesa Arch, twice before, and this being a borderline spiritual place for me, I didn't even think about danger or anything of the sort. Despite that, I had a sixth sense type of gut feeling pretty early on that we shouldn't head up there that night. Not wanting to freak myself out or my girlfriend, I didn't say anything or think much of it, and chalked it up to just being nervous because it was dark. There was a certain vibe along the roads leading up, and we noticed there were people leaving the park, but no one coming in ahead of us or behind us. The instinct to not continue hit me subtly a few more times, and I kept pushing it away like an idiot. I've been very familiar with these instincts over the past years, and they've served me well as far as I can tell. I think I genuinely thought I was just scared because it was dark. We ended up at the Mesa Arch parking lot, where two cars were parking up and heading out. When they left, it was almost completely dark, with only the faintest glow of the moon through the clouds, and not a person anywhere near us. Canyonlands is pretty remote. We get our backpacks on, grab a couple of things, and my girlfriend makes sure I've got my concealed carry. She doesn't usually care much, so this struck me as an indication she may be concerned too. We start heading up. It's a pretty short trail, maybe a quarter mile. All we wanted to do was this little bowl-like area, the main destination, and hang out to record some sounds. The area is pretty open, with trees both live and dead scattered around, bushes and small cacti, and rocky slopes that can be climbed in a few seconds. It's a pretty dope scene in the daytime. I've never felt uneasy here previously. We've been doing a bit of travel vlogging so far, so I continued doing that. I genuinely get goosebumps and chills every time I think about this part. It was the weirdest feeling I've ever felt. I felt the instinctual, I should get out of here, I'm being watched, etc. type of feelings before, and have several stories to tell from those, but I've never felt what I felt while vlogging tonight. This might not seem relevant, but for context, the field recording I do is largely of gathering wood and rock sounds. Canyonlands has Navajo sandstone and juniper wood, both of which sound wonderful when tumbled and rolled around. I think of field recording as an art, yes, but also as a way to appreciate a land in closer way, at least for me, than just taking pictures of it. I feel like I'm capturing the essence of a location in a very respectful way. As I'm vlogging, I felt something I can only describe as a need to show that I was there peacefully and with respectful intent. I didn't hear anything or see anything that would indicate that I needed to show I was here on peaceful business, but I felt it so strongly. Again, I didn't want to scare my girlfriend, so I didn't say this. I figured I was just feeling on edge being in near complete darkness. We could barely see our own feet on the easy open trail. We kept our lamps off to let our eyes adjust to the glow, but I turned mine on to read a plaque. My girlfriend mentioned I should probably turn it off so I don't create shadows and freak us out, so I turned it back off. I also felt like I was spotlighting myself by having it on, and I was about to turn it back off before she said that. We continued, and the uneasiness only grew. This lasted until we both reached the same exact spot on the trail and stopped at the same time in silence. "I think we should go back," my girlfriend said, and I agreed. Never have I felt a stronger feeling of being unwelcome in a place. It felt like we hit a barrier. Not only did I feel unwelcome, it was more particularly the feeling of intruding on a congregation, meeting, or gathering that we were not invited to. I don't know how to describe this feeling at all besides that, and it was not a conscious thought, it was just there, as these kinds of instincts tend to be. At that point, I realized I'd been ignoring these feelings long enough, and it was most certainly time to go. I have no idea what was going on in that little bowl we were about to reach, but I didn't want to find out. We made our way quickly back to the car. Soon as we got back, we heard a large pack of coyotes quite nearby, but in the opposite direction we'd been heading on the trail. If we continued on that trail, it was not coyotes we would have run into. Still, this felt like an additional cue to leave, and my girlfriend said, "That's our cue." I badly wanted to record their yips, but common sense took over and we got the hell out of there. The road, completely devoid of any sign of other people, was particularly eerie. Driving back wasn't just trying to get back to our campsite in Moab. It felt like we were escaping, like when you turn off the lights and run up the stairs. Now, relatively safe in our car, we discussed what had just happened. Every single unspoken, strong gut feeling I had, my girlfriend had felt the exact same things at the same times. Both felt the need to show someone's that we meant no harm by vlogging and being chill outwardly. Both felt multiple times both on the drive there and on the trail that we shouldn't go. Both felt at the same time that we were like actors on a stage being watched by a multitude of something. Both felt unwelcome, like we were crashing a party. Both felt that we needed to go at the exact same point on the trail. None of these were spoken aloud to each other at any point until we were back on the road. Get the helling out of there. As we drove, the moon became visible for a bit. I'm not familiar with moon stuff, but there had been a full moon a few days before, and that night it was large, not full though, and red. This was because of the red sand in the air from the windy day we'd had, I think, but my girlfriend said that also meant bad juju. Looking into the history of the region, and even stories of strange happenings at Mesa Arch, I'm sure we avoided something strange and or dangerous. Sometimes the places you love can get spooky things going on when you're there at the wrong time. Case file number 1333, written by Cassidy Lorraine. 1. Kevin, the Crouching Phantom. When I was around 15 years old, I lived with just my mom and I had the entire top floor as my room. Imagine a small loft with a door enclosing the room and a big skylight in the ceiling. It was a really cool room, but I digress. My friends and I had started messing around with the occult, doing little rituals and Ouija boards, typical teenage girl stuff. Or maybe my friends were just weird. Nothing ever happened with the Ouija board. When it did move, I was convinced from my friends giggling that one of them moved it themselves. It never spelled anything coherent out anyways. One night, after my friends had left and I was tucked into bed, I fell into a really deep sleep. I was probably asleep for 3 hours before I got the most insane adrenaline surge I had ever had in my life, and I've been in rollover accidents on the freeway. So I mean it when I say I got shocked out of my sleep with my own adrenaline, and it was immediately terrifying. I don't know how, but I knew I was being watched. I laid there with an increased heartbeat, and my eyes closed out of fear because I was so confused and alarmed. Whatever had woken me up like this, with no nightmares I could remember or sounds in my room in the dead of night, probably wasn't friendly. Eventually, I worked up the courage to open my eyes. I want to preface this by saying that I'm not religious, I am a skeptic. I'm still not sure if I believe in ghosts, but what I saw still sends a weird feeling into my gut when I remember it to this day. I opened my eyes, laying horizontally on my bed, and right in front of my face was a little boy crouched on his knees, maybe 6 inches away from my face. It was admittedly very hard to see him. My room was sparsely lit from little moonlight, but I remember he had black hair and black eyes and a grayish complexion, but that could have just been the moonlight. What gets me is that the second I saw him, his expression went from neutral to pure terror, like he was so incredibly scared that I could see him. Then this freaking thing, or a figment of my imagination I'll never know, leaned back on his elbows and like freaking crab walked back into the shadows of my room behind the illumination of the skylight. I tell people this story all the time. I sat there in the most insane fear I've ever had to this day for what felt like centuries. It was probably around an hour before I got up the courage to scream bloody murder from my mom downstairs. My mom used to tease me about it because of course she didn't find anything. She named the ghost Kevin, and we started blaming missing things or random stuff happening on Kevin. She thought it was funny, and I played along. But I will never forget what I saw. The adrenaline coursing through my veins made the possibility of it being a dream completely nil. It was so damn weird, and I'll think about it till the day I die. Bonus file written by Whiskey in a Mug. Ghostly Waves. I live in a brand new apartment building with my partner. I had just been discharged from the hospital after having surgery on my broken arm. My partner was at work. I was lying on the couch in my living room scrolling Reddit with my 2 cats asleep next to me. Both cats simultaneously snap awake and look towards the hallway. I glance over and see a 4-foot shadowy figure peeking around the corner at me. I couldn't make out any facial features at all, but I definitely saw a head, shoulders, and one arm holding the corner as if it was balancing itself. It felt playful in nature, and at the time, I honestly chalked it up to the painkillers I was prescribed and moved on. A few weeks went by. I had my cast and stitches removed and was off said painkillers. My partner and I had the night off together, so we decided to order takeout and watch a movie. At that point, I got up to use the restroom, and as I was on the toilet, I heard a pitter-patter of someone walking frantically down the hallway. Weird, but okay. When I returned to the living room, my partner asked me why I'd gone to the kitchen and back to the bathroom. I thought it was him. A few nights later, we're in bed when he sits bolt upright and flies towards our bedroom door. It was cracked open so the cats could meander in and out. I rolled over, startled by the sudden movement, and asked him what's wrong. I heard footsteps and it waved at me. What waved at you? Someone is making a shadow in the nightlight. It waved at me through the crack in the door. We cleared the apartment and there was no one there. The cats have become obsessed with crying in the hallway closet, doing the usual weird cat stuff, i.e. there's nothing there, why are you howling, what are you looking at, why are you suddenly so spooked behavior. Not the creepiest thing by any means, I just can't find any explanation for the sudden presences in a brand new building. Case notes file 1327. The Island of Inexplicable Silence. I don't recommend pressing your luck with a return visit. There are areas of the world that are more in flux than others. I think this is one of those areas. Where entering it, you're covered by a kind of metaphysical shield that doesn't enable the outside world to permeate through. It's not a physical barrier. And who knows if this kind of thing is even stable? I wouldn't test it. There are a lot of daredevils out there, and I guess through them we might learn more information. So there's that. Case notes for the bonus file. Two-Tone and the Unknown. Important to point out here that this could have been planned out by the group nevertheless, if both the old woman and the young chap were in on it. I don't typically make assumptions about fakery like that, but I also don't think it's wise to discount it entirely. Because some people do that. I mean, especially when money is involved. You have to be suspect of that. For me, reading this, the lack of a cold spell, or any sort of electrical distortion either, further indicates trickery by the paranormal tour guides, or points to another possibility, maybe. That spirits can only cause distortions either through intentionally willing it, or if they're draining energy from the surrounding area. If the latter, my guess is it's like a battery. Eventually they're all topped up and don't need any more. Maybe that's the case here. This young chap was fully charged. And now time for the quote of the day. Holding onto anger is like grasping onto hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Buddha. And you know, maybe the person you throw it at also gets burned, but is it worth it? You're getting burned, they get burned, maybe you burn the house down too. Just try not to fight fire with fire. Maybe sometimes it's unavoidable, but I think tamping down those instincts is a better, wiser course of action over the course of a lifetime. If you let anger fester, it's just going to cause havoc for everyone else and for many people that you love, that you don't intend to get harmed. They're going to get caught in the crossfire. Never a good thing. In fact, if you have anger, the best thing to do is just move away from whatever is causing you that anger. Go do something else. You move somewhere else if you have to. Sometimes it's the best course of action. Case notes file 1328. The day the sky shattered with the Columbia disaster. I do wonder how far this kind of explosive force could be felt, even hours away east. I'm not sure if this was a glitch per se, if you felt the reverberation beyond what should be intended. Just a terribly sad disaster though, in our quest to command the final frontier. I think there sadly will be more to come. But that's the nature of exploration, of pushing our boundaries. But even if it's not always safe, it's always worth doing. To those brave souls that gave their life in pushing the boundaries. May you all rest in peace. You deserve it. Case notes for the creepy file number 129. Red lights in the park. It's those little choices that can lead us to terrible and dangerous places. Ignoring your gut, the entire atmosphere of an area, and even your own dog's warnings. Well, it's a great thing that nothing happened in the end. Some people can be so creepy it boggles the mind. It's not the supernatural we have to fear. It's mankind. Sometimes. Not everyone. But when we do want to be feared, we can be truly terrifying. Case notes for the bonus file. The shared sense of dread. I think it's possible for spirits to induce visions into people nearby, into their minds. That's what happened here. It's impossible otherwise for two people to hallucinate the exact same vision at exactly the same time. I don't buy that. Something had to have induced it, and the most logical sense is the spirits that still occupy, that are still imprinted in that home. And now time for the quote of the day. I am not afraid of storms, for I am learning how to sail my ship. Louisa May Alcott. That's the whole story of life. Life is sailing a ship on open waters, on a horizon you have no idea what's on the other side of. You don't really get to decide what ship you have. You might have a rickety old little sailing ship. That's it. And other people might be born on a frickin' cruise ship. Other people might be born on a cruise ship that turns out to be the Titanic. So don't judge other people and their situation or bemoan life because it's unfair. It might be. And in some cases, it'll be unfair for different reasons than you might expect. All you can do, and actually harken back to a quote from Gandalf, is to decide what to do with the time you're given and the situations you're presented with. Because we don't control those things. We only control our own mind, our own actions, to some degree our thoughts, and more importantly, what we do with our thoughts and with our time. How are you going to use your time today? Let me know in the comments. Case notes for file 1329. Did I see my future self on the tram? You're not crazy, but I also don't think this was your future self. I think this was a deliberate alignment by your guardian angel that wanted you to have a glimpse of the whereabouts your current life trajectory would take you on by navigating you closer to someone that was very similar to you, but not you. I think this is important for all of us, to have a glimpse at that domino path that we're on right now. Where is it going to lead? We can always divert it. It's like we're on a train where we're the conductor that can alter the track we're on. But if you don't know where the track leads, it's very hard to make an informed decision. So I think guardian angels sometimes try to inform us. Subtly. And sometimes not so subtle, as in this case. Case notes for file 1330. The mysterious slapping boards. It's very odd indeed and eerie. Some kind of intelligent animal banging on flat branches together? I don't think it's Bigfoot exactly, but then who really knows what's out there? If you go camping, go prepared with items to defend yourself, because things do indeed go bump in the night, out in those deep woods. You don't want to be unprepared. Case notes for file 1331. The scream that stalked my soul. No one sane can knock you for being creeped out by this. Foxes make freaky mating sounds, like a scream, like a chilling scream that someone's in trouble, and that could indeed be it. A larger than typical fox population in that stretch of woods, so people report the fox mating call more often than usual. That said, is anyone going to go check? I wouldn't. What if it's a banshee or even worse? Anyways, I'll link a video below on the mating call sounds of foxes. Really is disturbing, but it's good to know it, just in case you hear something exactly like that. You know, okay, it's not a banshee, it's just foxes. Nature is weird. And now time for the quote of the day. Behold the turtle. He makes progress only when he sticks his neck out. James Bryan Conant. And as they also say, the turtle wins the race. Eventually. The very, very long-term race. You do have to stick your neck out here and there, don't you? Unless you're happy with a quiet life. For better or worse, you have to ask yourself what you want from life. It really is the ultimate question. Not the meaning of life. The meaning of your life. What is it? I can tell you the meaning of my life. My life's meaning is peace, good food, a beautiful view, a crackling fire by an open fireplace, while snow is gently falling outside, cuddle up on the couch with a warm, hot chocolate, and eventually some kids to share it with, and of course, a loving wife. I think Dave is afraid he's going to be left out, but I'm always going to bring you along, Dave. Case notes for file 1332. The Silent Watchers. Many people leaving the park, indicating that the shared dread may have been universal and thus very potent. The red moon would also add on top of the pile of signs if you want to consider that biblical angle. That part could be a coincidence, though, as you suggest, from particulates in the atmosphere from an earlier windy day. The Canyonlands area is indeed a very dry, sandy, and red place. The silver lining to this is, while I do think there were spirits there that considered your presence to be a form of trespassing, that you both received internal warnings simultaneously, and the big one at exactly the same time and place on the trail. I think that indicates some of the spirits there were less harsh in their view, and wanted to offer an ample warning before any other action was taken against both of you. Kind of similar to if you trespass on most people's places now. They're not just going to open fire instantly, they'll give you a warning to leave most of the time. So I think most spirits would be like that too. They do consider this holy ancestral land, perhaps, but they don't just want to, whatever ghosts would do, to fire away. Now time for the quote of the day. We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful what we pretend to be. Kurt Vonnegut. It's that other saying where you are what you do, and initially you could say you're pretending, because you're not that good at it yet. If you put 100 hours into something, a skill, a hobby, you'll be reasonably skilled at it. Of course, maybe not at the professional level. There's different layers and theories on how much time you have to put in to master something, like the 10,000 hours thing, and I think that's maybe true for absolute mastery, but you definitely don't need that much time to be decent and pretty good at something. A few 100 hours, you can improve really well, depending on your base level of talent. And to me, that's, I think, what talent is. Talent is just the base level where you start at. Like in an MMORPG where your character's skill is tracked by a specific number, like 1 to 99 in RuneScape or 1 to 300 in World of Warcraft. Those with a lot of talent, innate talent in any given field, they might start at like level 50 mining instead of 1. And you have no talent at all, you start at level 1. So you can both still get to the max level, and there's probably no difference if you both do. It just, for people without talent, it might take longer. But that doesn't really matter. If you enjoy pretending to be a carpenter, or a brick mason, or a orator, that's exactly what I did. I pretended to be a narrator for a long time until I eventually became one. Whatever it is you enjoy doing, even if you don't have any natural talent, that's okay. You're starting at level 1. If you enjoy it, just keep at it, and eventually you'll reach the same level where other people may have, by default, been level 50, and it took you 2 years to reach that same level, but now you're even, and now you can progress. Life isn't fair, but that doesn't mean you can't out-earn the unfairness. Question to file 1333. Kevin, the crouching ghost. That a ghost might be scared that we can see them, not the other way around, is quite the twist. There's some logic to it. For the majority of your existence as a spirit, no one ever realized you're there. So it's as if you're adorned with a persistent cloak of invisibility, and then in one instant, someone notices you. You're just watching them sleep, maybe bored, maybe interested in them for some reason, and then they notice you? When that's never happened before? I would be scared, even if I was a ghost. It would be piercing. An unforgettable moment of horror for you and Kevin, because of the unknown. Why did that happen? Case notes of the bonus file. Ghostly waves. 4 foot tall and a pitter-patter sound? I believe you're playing host to a haunting of a large dog. The waving your boyfriend saw in the shadow could have been a moving paw or maybe a wagging of a ghostly tail. Indeed, via the auditory clue, I don't think this was human. Or maybe it's a human and also his pet. Maybe both of them. I would imagine if a pet dies, and with the owner too, just that traumatic bond could make them linger behind. Again, just a fragment of it. Now time for the quote of the day. The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time, and still retain the ability to function. F. Scott Fitzgerald. They have a word for this, cognitive dissonance. But usually it rubs people the wrong way, and I think it's why most people stick to a particular ideological tribe, because to even entertain another idea, to incorporate it into your mind, it's like installing it on the computer, but only running it in a virtual machine so it doesn't affect the main one, so you're afraid, this might be a virus, like a intellectual virus. You have to be able to partition it away, still inside your mind, to consider it. If you're a capitalist and you still want to understand communism and vice versa, or any other possible contradictory opinion, things that don't mesh together, oil and water, you still want to be able to think about them, to contemplate them, because if you can't, it's like the opposite of strawmanning someone, it's steelmanning them, to show that you understand their position. Even if you don't believe it's true, or accurate, or workable, you still want to be able to entertain other people's ideas. Because if you can't do that, well, really, you're never in a discussion with someone else. It's battlefield. That's it. And that always ends bloody. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.